Hey everybody, welcome back for the second part of this video. We're going to go ahead and reassemble this S6 Edge Plus. I'm going to start with the earpiece speaker. Go ahead and insert that back into the earpiece hole. That is with the cable off to the right. With that in, we can go ahead and put in our proximity sensor cable as well. So you see there's actually three pieces to this. We're going to put the mic in first, which is the kind of the goldest portion right next to the earpiece speaker. You have to pull back the cable just a little bit of the earpiece speaker. You'll see that it fits right into a little housing hole there. Go ahead and push all of these back in their grommets. Now the mic won't really want to sit back in. There's no adhesive on it, so don't stress too much about it. Once you put the rear cover back on, go ahead and fill back in. We're just going to push down on the cable, make sure it's well adhered back onto the rear of the device. Next up is going to be the vibration module. You'll see that the contact points fit back in, so you can't really mess up the insertion of that one. There's a little bit of adhesive still in the back of it. Normally that's enough just to keep it back in place. Our next step is to go ahead and put our logic board back into the phone. Now to do that, we're going to go ahead and clip in the connector towards the bottom of the logic board. Now this one can be a little bit tricky. And honestly, the easiest way is to do it the way that I'm doing here. You want to fold it back and then push it on. You can pull these two wire antenna connectors back just a little bit out of their housing. I'll show you how to put those back in just a few seconds. So it doesn't want to snap back in, so I'm going to try it sideways here. There we go. Now there's actually a cutout on the bottom of this logic board where the two antenna cables will go in. I would suggest putting those underneath it now. Make sure that when you put the logic board down that all of the ribbon cables are pulled out from underneath it. So you have the earpiece speaker, the proximity sensor, and then the ribbon cable for the display as well. So make sure all those are pulled out. You have to wiggle the board around just to get it set back in place. Once it's where you want it to be, you can go ahead and reconnect all of the ribbon cables back to the phone. Put down the mic proximity sensor. There we go. Now with that done, we can go ahead and reattach these two antenna cables down here. So there's a little guide housing just right next to where the battery inserts that these will actually fit back down into. So just use a spudger or something smaller to kind of push this back in. Now right here's where I was talking about. The logic board kind of pulls over a little bit. You're going to want the cable to go underneath the logic board and then up and out through this little hole it has. I'm just going to use a dental pick to put this back in place. I would suggest just doing that when you put down the logic board of the phone. The blue one first, and that goes off to the far contact. Now these button on like a pair of button jeans, so we're just going to try to snap it back in place. It'll be a little bit tricky to get snapped in there. You don't want to put a lot of force on them as you push them in, so just make sure you have it right over the top. There we go. It's reconnected. The same thing with this black cable. Push it back down into its housing that goes around the battery. This is a little bit trickier because it goes right on top of the blue cable. Doesn't always want to basically snap back in. And pushing it underneath the logic board is fairly tricky. So again, like I was saying, once you have attached that bottom charge port cable, just make sure you guide these back in to there's correct spots on the logic board. You go ahead and snap them in right here. Alright, let's try to get that back in correctly. Next step is to go ahead and put back in the battery. Now, you can see that the back of it's a little bit deformed, and you may just want to reapply the adhesive just to the correct spot. No, normally this is sticky enough, you can just put it right back on. So don't stress too much about putting new adhesive on. Now, if you really need that, just use the same adhesive that we're going to do to put the back on, which is double-sided 3M tape, either or that or VHB adhesive. Put the battery connector back on, and just make sure the battery's nice and snug in there. Alright, here's your heart rate sensor, which is just connected to the logic board as well. So we're looking pretty good. I've got everything reattached. We'll go ahead and take our front housing, put the charge port in first, and then basically just push down on the remaining portion of the device, all the way up and down. Now with that done, we can go ahead and start the tedious process of putting all the screws back in. Now there's still two attached into this rear housing, so we're going to go ahead and screw those in first. Now, before we put all these screws in, and I was realizing this a little bit late, but maybe what you should do is go ahead and put the two in for the power button, power the device on, and double check and make sure it's functional before you waste your time of inserting the remaining 55,000 screws you have to put in here. The next step is to go ahead and just put all these in. They don't have to be extremely tight. This would be nice and snug. You don't want to strip any of them just in case you have to come back in the phone and fix something else in the future. So we'll go through and just reinsert all of these screws in here. Powered on, just make sure it's going to work here real fast. Perfect. We have screen power on, so we're going to go ahead and put in the remaining portion of the screws. Now, I'd also suggest that you test everything. Test your Wi-Fi, your phone calling abilities. Make sure the phone works fully before we go through the trouble of reattaching the back to this device. We got one side of the phone done. Sometimes these screws can be a little bit tricky. There we go. We're getting pretty close here. Looks like we're good. We're going to go ahead and peel off all of this back adhesive. Once you really remove it, it really loses its adhesive strength. This stuff is pretty thick. It's almost like a silicone tape. See if we can't pull it off in one piece without having to go back. The nice thing about this tape is it doesn't leave a ton of residue everywhere. So basically you can pull it up and off. You don't really have to clean the back side of this phone like you do with a lot of other double-sided adhesives. Now I know in the future they'll probably make these pieces of adhesive that you can just put right back on the phone. Now since this is basically doesn't come out until tomorrow, we'll go ahead and just use some 3M VHB tape. That's a red back tape you can get off of eBay. It's a little bit higher heat strength tape than I've noticed than just the regular black 3M. So we're going to use the thinner tape here. I'll be using the two sizes. This is a 3mm 3M tape. So it's still 3M, but it's just a 3M VHB tape. We'll cut that to fit. Then we'll use the same size of tape on the opposite side of the phone. And again, just doing the same thing, cutting the length to kind of fit this opposite side. Now for the bottom, the top, and some filler, we'll use the thicker 5mm tape in width. And what we'll do is we'll basically cut the corners of this tape to fit the corners of the phone. So we get a nice solid adherence all the way around. We don't want this back cover to pop off. So just cut it just like so. A little quarter circle. Doesn't have to be perfect, just so you can get a little bit more adherence on that corner there. And what we'll do is we'll basically cut it short of the opposite corner and do the same thing for that corner as well. See if we can't get it lined up correctly. There we go. Do the same thing across the top as well. All right, looking good so far. Now we're just going to put in some filler tape. There's a couple places there are tape on the back of this phone. We want to kind of beef up. My theory is if they put tape there, it's probably for a reason. So we're going to put a piece of tape, that thinner 3mm tape across the bottom here. Put some thicker strips in the place that had thicker tape on the back of the phone. So right through here. I'm just going to put it down the side closer to the camera, then we'll cut it to fit the right area. We'll do a strip in the middle as well. Now, there wasn't any tape on top of the wireless charging mat, so I'm going to be a little bit careful of that. Well, my scissors are getting extra sticky. See, it looks like my tape pulled off the backing, so I'm just going to pull this piece off. Take a second and clean my scissors. I'm going to put a little bit of tape down here at the bottom corner where it was a little bit trickier to get off. I'll put a thinner tape just down this side here as well. Alright, there we go. So now I've got all the tape on the back of the phone. The next step is to go ahead and put the back on, but before that we do that, we're going to want to clean it up a little bit. You see right here where we have our back piece, and it has all this adhesive still on it. We don't want to create any ridges or it's going to feel phony in the back of the phone. So what we're going to do is clean this off. We're just going to use some isopropyl alcohol. This is 90% alcohol. And we'll go ahead and just clean up the sides of the phone here. This does a pretty good job of taking off most of it. I don't have to worry about any streaks on the back of this or anything because it won't be showing. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly perfect. The goal is to make sure that all the big chunks are gone. There may be some really flat residue on there, which is fine, but anything that would cause the screen to lift, don't want that. If you really are picky like me, you can go ahead and scrape it with a spudger, flatten it out, and then clean it off if it's being a little bit tricky to get removed. To use a little bit more elbow grease here. It's being a little bit tricky in this area. There's a lot of glue up here. There we go. Now if you did damage the back of the glass, taking it off if you're using a metal tool, you can just use something to cover it up. Whether it's a marker or something, nail polish, whatever you want. Just make sure that it's nice and flat. I'll just end up using a blue marker to kind of cover it up. Looks like it dug in a little bit, kind of like a plastic would. Alright, the next step of our repair process here is to basically remove all the backing off the tape. You may have to push down on the top of the corner. Make sure it's adhered well to pull the backing off. And normally it'll pull right off for you. We'll go ahead and remove all of the backing off of all of the tape. Now if you're pulling this off and it kind of pulls up or bubbles or doesn't want to lay back down flat if it does pull up, you're going to want to pull it off and put a new piece of tape on. If you try to push down a ridge when you put the back of your phone on and it bugs you, it sticks up, then you got to pull it off and put all new tape down. Really, it's just easier to take care of it right now than just go ahead and wait. Alright, now with that done, we can go ahead and put our back on. So I like to start in the bottom corner here. Be a little bit tricky to get it lined up. Once you get one corner lined up, you can kind of tip the other one in and fit down. And then you can work your way down the sides of the phone. Can't really see where I dinged it too much, which is nice. And there you go, that's the reassembly of the Edge 6 Plus. Go ahead and throw your SIM card slot back in there. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comments. We'll do my best to answer those for you. Subscribe for future videos, and hit that like button if you found this helpful. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to catch you on the next one.